The Business Journal Roundtable series is sponsored by iSynergy, creative digital advertising.
How is the business technology you provide accelerating the speed of business and productivity?
I think that over the course of the last 2 years, we've had roughly 2 decades of evolution in technology. We have been forced to adapt to something that none of us obviously expected, but the benefit of that is that the technology has grown so fast. So we have great technology that's now supporting our remote offices, our outsourced teams. We have great technology that's surrounding the automation of menial, monotonous tasks, such as bookkeeping, and some of the data collection surrounding business analytics. It's been a lot of fun to see that evolution over the last 3 years. I went the 10 years prior to that drudging along with some very slow evolution of technology. In the last 3 years, we've seen things like QuickBooks Online grow to a whole different monster, platforms like Fathom and all the different things that plug into products like QuickBooks Online that can help businesses, small businesses, compete with very, very large businesses.
Right, I agree, Tim. Great point. We do sort of the same thing with NetSuite as being a cloud-based product. Many of our clients were in a good position prior to COVID to be easily dispersed and get remote because you can get it from any device, anywhere, anytime. So when it was March 17, 2020, everyone said, "Hey, go home and work." They were able to do that right away. And also the speed of delivery on new customers is much quicker. You can provision an account and within 24 hours have access to it and start functioning with it. I mean, that's a pretty broad term, but you actually have access to the software in 24 hours and you could start setting it up and move forward quickly. So that for speed purposes and efficiency, you can't beat that. In the old days, we'd have to install software, download it, CDs, all that, and then we have to put it on a server. All that work is taken away from us now. We just basically turn it on and go.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the last 3 years of the pandemic and the evolution, because up till this point, we've watched virtual reality and augmented reality just sort of sit there. Second Life's been around for 30 years and no big deal. But because of the pandemic, now these are technologies that have entered the workforce and they're here to stay.
Yeah, we don't bring new software to our clients. We just utilize whatever they have in place. Like we, at the pandemic when it came out, everybody always asks how'd you deal with it? What'd you do? It was about a 15-minute thing for us. People came into the office, grabbed their stuff, and went home because we already had, we had our Slack set up for our internal communication. We had our PM tool. I'm sorry, we're not big enough for NetSuite, so we have a smaller PM tool. But we already had our QuickBooks Online. We had all of our platforms, marketing automation platforms online. Gmail, we were hosted on G Suite, so we had Google Meet already set up. We didn't have to jump onto a Zoom and have the threat of that. So we were ready to go. So it was simple for us. I know it was great for you guys IT companies because everybody was like scrambling and it was billable through the roof. But but for us it was just simple. If you set up and you're progressive prior to, if they're available, right? If it's available and you know about it, be forward thinking.
Well, I think that's a good jumping off point. Not to make a comment on the billable or not billable part, but we spent the prior 2 years from about, I think it started in about 2017. We started forcing clients to come up with a disaster recovery plan, to come up with, to kind of move them in the right direction. So that transition in March and April, we were a little busy, but it wasn't a huge uptick in what we normally did. The two biggest issues that we had to contend with were some people still had a lot of desktop computers and we had to kind of figure out the logistics of that. And then some people had some really bad home internet connections that we had to contend with. But for the most part, a lot of our clients were pick it up and go. But you have to have the infrastructure to enable that. That's not a decision that you can necessarily make and spin up in a month. So to Jim's point from earlier, the cloud absolutely helps with that. As much stuff as you can get into the cloud, it helps you be more mobile and more efficient and a little bit more elastic is the term that I would use. But there's prep work that has to go into that. You can't make that decision and have it work immediately.
I think going off of the pandemic and the changes that we've had with that, we personally just saw a benefit for one of our customers that's impacted by the train derailment, where so they're not allowed anywhere close to their offices, yet they're able to still keep working. Made a couple changes to the phone system as far as their messages for customers calling in, and they already had their laptops. They're using Office 365, so they're already set up to get their email from anywhere, and their cell phones are now ringing with their desk extensions. So it was certainly a scary time for their business. They still don't know exactly what condition everything's going to be in, but they've been able to keep in communication with their customers and operate in no way normally, but they're able to be there answering the phones and try and figure out what's going next.
What kind of business is that?
They're a waste management business. So
were their trucks
collection and
rolling? Were their
removal.
trucks able to roll?
Originally, they were able to get a vehicle on loan from another company. I guess they did manage to get their trucks out of there at some point. I believe the railroad wanted them moved because of the proximity to the crash. So they've got those out at least. And but last I heard, they were actually in the wider evacuation zone where they had been moved. So I don't know the current status of them today, but I know that the phones are ringing and their email's working. So
those are the important ones. The way the pandemic changed things and made us think differently about the way we do things in remote. With a lot of our partners, we had gotten ahead of it, similar to what Robert had said. We have always preached DR. If you lose your building, what's going to happen if something happens here? How do we work remote? So we've always had good disaster plans for all of this for all of our partners. So when that time came, it was fairly easy to make those transitions. But again, challenges with home internet and securing the home networks. It's easy to secure inside your firewall and inside your network, but how do you secure the endpoints that are not protected by you or managed by you, and that your people are using to access your data? And we've come up with different DNS filtering solutions and things like that to try to secure them and to keep our networks protected from the outside worlds. So I guess that was.
We had a dial-up connection. we found one client that had a user with a dial-up connection.
America Online.
Yeah, that's what they were using. Yeah.
So we can assume that the pandemic really people that weren't up to speed got up to speed. Those who were up to speed profited greatly or were able to keep going.
Anybody that was dragging their feet, it made them.
Yeah.
It's like too bad.
Decision
Yeah.
point.
Would we say that most of the small businesses in our coverage area are up to speed?
No, absolutely not.
Any idea? I'm sure there's ma and pa companies, small businesses that maybe can't afford this. Any percentages, any idea of where we stand compared to elsewhere?
All of them. I've said for years that if this, I'm serious. If the average company is 3 years behind the latest technology curve, which is a statistic that I've heard repeated for years, then this valley is another 10 years behind that. And I think I was talking to Mike Moliterno about this, but he had asked me if there's a band of businesses, a size, a revenue level where it gets better or worse, and it's not. It's bad across the board, no matter what size you are, and no matter how large you are, and no matter what the concerns are. We struggle getting people to take these things seriously still. They look at it as a cost center. This has been a pet peeve of mine for a decade. They don't look at it as a revenue driver or enabler. I'm big on efficiency. They don't even see it as an efficiency multiplier.
Plus it's a hassle.
It is, and it can be, but if done properly, there's a lot of efficiency to be gained by it, and there's things that you could do to make it easier. So one of the things that we're doing, and I don't want to take up the time, but we made it a goal starting last year and going into this year that every single client that we have has to align with some kind of cybersecurity framework. And I think this is going to be the way of the future. And what it's enabled us to do is we don't have to go in front of our client and say, these are things that Avrem Technologies recommends. We've been doing that for years, but now we've got a framework written by a scientific or an academic body or a research body or whatever the case may be, that we can point to and say, this framework outlines all of the things that you need to do. It's not us telling you to do this anymore. This is truly an industry standard best practice. And by getting that in front of people and letting them know that it's not a cash grab and it's not just us spouting off things from the top of our head, which I would argue we haven't done, but it may appear to be that way sometimes, it gives them something to work towards. And it makes it a little bit more accessible.
I think most places are terrified to make the change. I think that our community in general has lived in some constant state of fear for the last 40 years. And most places really don't have any idea how to even get to that point. They're afraid to charge the right price for the product that they're offering. Therefore, they've made the same amount of money for the last 30 years. They took over their parents' business that charged the same thing over that period of time. And they don't know how to make that transition. So I think that it has to start even beyond understanding the dynamics of efficiencies and profits gained and disaster recovery plans by looking back at the core of their business and saying, you can't afford not to do this, and here's why, and here's how to transition, and here are the things that you need to do to adapt your business and to charge the right prices so that you have the money to be able to afford all this infrastructure that you should have had 20 years ago, but you didn't because you were slow to change your price because you let fear run your business.
They don't even factor it into the equation half the time. It doesn't even, when we have a lot of manufacturing clients, and when they calculate the costs of services, parts that they're making, whatever, that infrastructure that it takes to run their business securely doesn't even factor into the discussion. They don't even, it's not a thought most of the time.
Correct. One of the big things we do is we'll go into businesses and try to have a business conversation with them about that. And what we refer to most of what we're talking about here is technical debt, meaning that they haven't put money into their infrastructure, and over the years it's just crumbling. And then we work with that partner. One of the things we like to do with all of our partners is we build out roadmaps and show them how you can come in and say everything needs replaced, and that just seems so daunting to them, and I understand why. But we'll break it down into smaller, manageable chunks, build it out on a 5-year plan, keep them on a roadmap to keep their technology up to date, so that once we get them out of that debt, they maintain it and continue their efficiencies. And that's one of the big pieces that we try to offer as one of our services to all of our partners. So.
It's typical that the change is only driven by some reaction to some event, not a proactive planning approach. Right, where you say, hey, we're going to do this in the next 3 years. No, we're going to wait till our server crashes and call these guys and get it replaced. Right. That's kind of the problem with some of the small businesses out there, and it really comes down to expense. I mean, Tim, what's the normal percentage of IT spend in a company? 6-7% maybe of their revenue per year, roughly. We're lucky if we get 2% here, right? Yeah. 2 or 3.
Theory has always been bad about spending money on technology. I have to admit that to you. Robert, I was going to ask you, I agree with you that all of them need help, but you find some bright stars out there, and it's usually on the individual basis or the huge company basis. That is true for you, because I was noticing that myself. Individuals will go running off in the right direction. They maybe almost as if they were hobbyists. With computers, they will always have the top flight stuff, but you don't see it in the mom and pops. And it's a matter of money. We all run across, what do you have to spend, and what are you going to spend it on? And
I think a lot of it. Sorry.
No, I'm at the end.
I think a lot of it has to do with the history of the area as well. You look at the big business that's around, or what's been here in the past, and it's manufacturing, it's retail, and those are two of the segments that spend the least traditionally on IT. So we get outside of that into the smaller businesses, but we still have that attitude from years of working for the manufacturing companies, or working with the manufacturing companies, or our family worked for manufacturing. And it's hard for an area that views tech as maybe a necessity, but something to be pushed to the bottom of that budget sheet. It's hard to really address that feeling, because it's been around for decades. It's not just something new.
That's a really interesting point, because you look at the steel industry, you look at the entire picture of the demographics of our region and our history. It's kind of always been that way. I mean, there were points in time where we were leaders, but then it became Band-Aid.
Well, and I was going to say, it really is the area. The area has a lot to do with it. We have clients in 21 states. We don't get some of the pushback in some of the other states that we do in Northeast Ohio and Western Pennsylvania.
And look at how the steel mills left here. They left here because they didn't put any money into new technologies. They were using, what, 1920 technology when they went down in the 70s.
Yeah, the last blast furnace went up in 1944 for World War II production. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to add?
Just one thing. We have seen a bright spot that's starting to push companies in the right direction. As there's been more and more news of cyber attacks and cybersecurity instances that affect small and medium businesses, they're looking for cybersecurity insurance. And the insurance providers are demanding that they make changes to their networks and their way of handling their technology infrastructure. And we're seeing a lot of companies coming to us and saying, we're required to do this and this and this, or the state auditors requiring us to do this. How can we do that? So that's given us an avenue into making improvements at some companies that I don't think would have been ready for it otherwise.
Fear sells.
To put it into perspective, the average insurance application that we would help clients with 3 to 5 years ago was maybe 1 or 2 pages. It asked for top line revenue, big clients, check a couple of boxes, and that was it. And excuse me, the last insurance application I worked with a couple of weeks ago with a client was 37 pages. Same coverage, same company, same insurance carrier. So that is a good judge of how much this has changed in the last couple of years and why we're aligning to these frameworks. This is going to be how it is from now on.
Okay, let's move on because I would like to turn the discussion to artificial intelligence that we're hearing so much about. In the simplest of terms, please explain how it works. How are AI business systems evolving and changing businesses? Are your clients using artificial intelligence? How should small businesses be using artificial intelligence? And what is the cost efficiency or the ease of use? Big subject, but let's try to break it down because our readers, they want to know.
Artificial intelligence is training computers on past history and letting it be aware of all that's out there so that when you ask it a question, it's going and looking at all the things it's seen and giving you an answer based on that. So, everyone here knows what a CAPTCHA is when you go to a website. Do you think that CAPTCHA is in the business of providing security to websites? You'd be mistaken.
Ralph, I don't think everybody knows what that means.
CAPTCHA is the thing that asks you to identify all the traffic lights to make sure that you're not a robot, or asks you to find the vehicles, etc. Their real business is to provide machine learning data for artificial intelligence. When you have electric vehicles that are going to be self-driving, who do you think is verifying that the picture has a red light in it so that when they show it to the machine, it knows what a red light looks like? You are when you do a CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA's business is to provide that data for artificial intelligence. So you show a machine 600,000 red lights in all different perspectives from all different ideas, and it sees one in a different way. It has an ability to recognize it because it's seen 600,000 of them. That's what that's how it works.
In the world of ERP, which I live in, AI is transitioning decision support systems to decision-making systems. So in the old days, we provide data The ERP system, we provide data to the users. Okay, now we make our decisions based on that. Now we're skipping that part and just going right from, here's the data, here's the decision, done. Issue purchase orders automatically, whatever, supply chain management plans, all that is happening automatically based on the information that it has within the system. So it went from decision support to decision making. The road is not smooth. there's some rocks in that road. It's a little bit rocky, but that's where it's headed. And NetSuite itself has AI built in for its decision making, decision support, and all the ERP packages are having that now.
And ERP is Enterprise Resource Planning.
Resource Planning.
So you provide software to the businesses. The business puts all of its information into that software. So what is an example of a decision? Should I buy more product?
Right. So it could look at not only does it look at the information that's in your ERP, it's pulling information from everywhere, right? Where would I buy it? What's the cheapest path? What's the logistics? How should I ship it? All these things are happening like that, rather than having somebody sit in front of a computer and say, well, let me get a quote from 3 guys. Let me get, where should I get the freight? Who should handle the freight? Where should I buy this product? Should I buy it at all? How much should I buy? When should I have it delivered? When am I going to sell it? All these things are kind of just being determined in the background. And, and there's the issue that I see with it is there's no nuance. There's no person there saying, hey, that sounds right, or that doesn't sound right. That's me just probably being old school, but I think we lack some of that, in the AI, but it's certainly efficient without a doubt.
And I think it's Domino's Pizza also noticing that you buy a pepperoni pizza every Thursday evening at 5 o'clock and making sure that their location has the supplies to give that to you. And by the way, eventually just curating it for you. You don't even call in. You just get your pizza every Thursday night.
I think it sounds very ethereal when we talk about AI, but I think the real world today, logistics of it, is more like what Jim's talking about, where it's about decision making, it's about analyzing the data. We're moving to a model where the asset of the business is the data. It's not the servers and the computers and the hardware anymore, or the infrastructure. So what do you do with that data after it's in the cloud and it's not connected to anything? As costs have come down, as technology has gotten better, this becomes more accessible for businesses to utilize these tools to analyze something that they may not have had the power to do before, or it wasn't cost effective. So it's just become a little bit more accessible to everyday businesses.
In its simplest form in our world, in the accounting and advisory space, a lot of our clients are utilizing products like QuickBooks Online. QuickBooks and Intuit has been one of the most popular platforms for small to medium-sized business for decades. They've been building AI into their system for many, many years. The simplest example I can give is you write a check once a month to your landlord, and when the system sees that check coming through your bank account, after you've told it on multiple occasions that that's rent, it now just remembers that every time. So, we tell people as they're setting up their platforms that their accounting system is now an intuitive system. It learns, it gets better, it gets more efficient. The thing that I think is most important for us here locally is that we have this huge generational gap. We have this huge generational exodus of the workforce that we have to replace. And AI is a tool that can help us to do that, because it will help us automate some of the things that we used to have someone sitting behind a machine or sitting in front of a notebook writing things down. In its very basic sense, it can take care of some of those very menial tasks, such as bookkeeping and or just simple data collection for small to medium-sized businesses.
Steve, I wanted to call on you because you have a totally different use for AI.
Yeah, and I think Robert, right, to his point, first-party data is currency now. So he hit it. First-party data is currency. In every business, if you don't look at it like that, you have a huge mistake in the way you're looking at your business. It's mindset, right, especially in this area, to bring it back a little bit. It's about mindset, because I think the smaller companies you guys probably work with the IT is, I don't have an IT company because I don't need one, right? because I'm an early adopter. I'm on the fringe of knowing the different platforms that are needed. So when you walk into a company that needs it, they are kind of pushing back because they're not an early adopter. They're not, educating themselves where they need to be at. But for AI, in the exact example of Domino's, they're going to get an email at 5:30 about, hey, don't you want your pizza today? Because AI hit that marketing automation platform, or a text, an SMS, is exactly the way that we would use AI based upon your data set, your intent. We do it a lot with targeting, programmatic, audience behavior, custom audiences, based upon a data set. And it's everything with AI is based upon a data set, which you kind of referenced. Sometimes that data set is the internet, right? Sometimes that data set is my own business data. But the way, it's funny because you guys talked about, you said 10 years behind with Youngstown. I always say Youngstown 7 years behind. But it's this conversation, walking into it today, and I'm like, you know what? We watch those old interviews of people talking about the internet back in the late 80s and early 90s, and people being like, what's that @ symbol in that address? 10 years from now, we're going to be watching this video, and we're going to be like, oh my gosh, well, we didn't know what, because we're on the fringe of where it is, right? Of how we utilize it and how we can capitalize on it. And in 6 months or 2 weeks or 6 years, it can do a complete 180 on every single one of our industries that we're in, because it isn't bound. That's the crazy part of it, and it's the adoption rate. When Tim talked about manufacturing, bring AI into the manufacturing, robots. Nope, I don't want robots. It's going to take all of our jobs. No, let's adopt them, because people are going to need to understand the software to build and program those robots. So let's be progressive in our industries and not just dig our heels in and be like, nope, we don't want that. We're not gonna evolve like that. This is the way we've done it for 50 years, and this is the way we're gonna stay. Well, you know what? Then your industry leaves.
We're not gonna have a choice though, because we've had the good luck in the last 2 years up in Lordstown. Altium is going to have thousands of workers go through there that are not going to be allowed to be old. They're going to have to be up to date. They're going to have to know new technology. In fact, we received a gift in that the cars being made there and the batteries being made there, they're not just new companies that have come to Youngstown. They're absolutely new industries. Nobody's made batteries like that before. Nobody's made a tractor that a mom and pop farm can buy and just put out in the field on its own using AI to have it do what it's supposed to do. It's like buying a hired hand, one that doesn't go to the bathroom, doesn't join a union, and doesn't complain when you don't feed it right.
Smoke breaks.
Great point.
Moving on, I wanted to talk about generative AI and generating text, images, and sounds and other media. We know that it's long been used by Meta and Google. But I know that most recently, at least in the press that I read, we were hearing about OpenAI, which unveiled a system that lets users generate photorealistic images and so forth. OpenAI recently released a chatbot that answers questions in concise prose. Where is this headed? Are your clients using generative AI? How are local businesses using chatbots, and how should they use generative AI?
I saw this used, and I went and asked. We had a website that we had to launch. It had to do with racism, and so I went to the ChatGPT, and I put the following question in: how can we eliminate racism? In 3 seconds, I got a page. The page started out with a paragraph that described the problem. There were then 6 bullet points as to what you could do to eliminate racism that came from my knowledge of experts out there in the field. It apparently just pulled their writings and pulled these things right out. And then it ended with a summary paragraph. And it was well written, and it said all the things that I would have wanted to get. I went back a month later and did it again, and it gave me 8 more points. They were not the same points. They were different, but they were in the same vein. That's what you can get out of this. You can go and just ask it a question that's on your mind, and it conversationally gives you an answer. And it gives it in pretty good form. I could see not just websites, people looking for text, but people looking for answers that they were putting into search engines prior to now. They'll put into a ChatGPT box and they'll get a real answer.
That's actually a good point, because I was talking to some of my guys about this the other day, and somebody actually said it's the new Google, or it's going to be the new Google, because they're going to it for, we're troubleshooting problems that we can't necessarily figure out.
.com, by the way, YOU.com is the first one.
Well, it's been in the news recently. ChatGPT is passing college level exams on its own without.
Oh, it'll write papers.
Submitting papers that are grammatically perfect, and it's a challenge for a lot of industries, but one specifically is higher education.
So they're worried about it in the art field because the artists are saying this machinery is gone and it's captured my art, but it's not different than a human artist would do. If you went to art school or you took art history, you would go through the same kind of thing that this machine learning is going to go through, and you'd then turn around and start producing art. Nobody would accuse you of plagiarism, but it's not different for the machines now. This isn't plagiarism.
Steal from one's plagiarism, steal from many's research, right?
To your question, none of my clients have even dipped their toe in the water of that.
None of them have. But Steve, I know that people
We've
that
been using Copy AI and Jasper AI for probably about 2 years now to write a lot of our SEO blogs. It takes our time down, cuts it in half. We go from a 6-hour blog down to about a 2-hour blog. And we're talking anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 words. The issue that we're finding right now is everything you're saying is absolutely correct. It's a research. It's bringing in, extracting data and putting it in a new formulation. What it doesn't do is give an opinion. And that's a huge thing for us, for certain blogs that we do, certain website content that we do, is, it's factual and it's truthful, but it's not opinionated. And anybody that has a business and a brand needs to have a culture and an opinion and some level of humanization behind that. And that's currently where, now tomorrow very well could change, but that's currently where we're seeing the disconnect, that where we can't use it, because we have some clients where it's all about like Mahoning County Visitors Bureau, Youngstown Live. We cannot use AI on any of that because they have specific, we talk about things to do in Youngstown on a date night. There are things that we have to hit. We have ways that we have to present that, and ways, the framework we need to construct that to deliver it to the public. So it absolutely, we can't. We've tried bending it and doing everything we can, but in that instance, you just can't. Nothing currently today, the way that we use it, we can't replicate the human aspect of writing that.
I think this is one of those things that if small businesses use it correctly, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity for them to gain a competitive advantage. Small businesses for the last 20 years have been pushed down further and further by the Walmarts and Amazons of the world. Now, pieces of technology like this can help them in their content creation strategies, whether it's SEO, whether it's email newsletters, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook posts. They can use it as a guideline. They can use it as a map. It's still not something that is going to communicate their culture in their opinion, but at least now gives them a roadmap to follow. So I think that the more small businesses that are looking at these types of things to gain a little bit of a competitive advantage are the ones that are going to move along much faster, especially locally, because they're going to gain little tiny wins along the way by having some of that roadmap for their content creation strategy.
Is it expensive?
No.
No. Super cheap, especially when you compare it to labor.
That's essentially the ability to ask a right question or to describe something that you want in words that make sense to the machine. If you're asking for an art piece, all clip art is going to be replaced by this. You're not going to bother. You're just going to say, I need a mouse, I need a bottle of pop, and I need a plate. And it'll appear. So that kind of thing is going to replace that kind of work. I think what you're going to see that isn't going to be able to be described real well is in the manufacturing businesses and in the technology businesses where somebody asks the right question. What material could I use for this instead that's cheaper? What process could I use that's different, that's better? And you're going to get an answer. And you're going to need to be an expert to understand the answer, but the answer might be those very answers that you've been looking for 20 years. You can now try those out on. And I think that's where, when it gets into operations, then you're really going to see a revolution. Replacing a copywriter's work, not really critical. Making a... I'm sorry, I actually could do that better. But curing cancer, knowing which molecule to go after, that might be something that we get out of machine learning a lot better than we get out of humans.
Okay, well, let's just move on just real quickly. And I'm kind of backtracking, but what percentage of businesses that you deal with already have a CRM or are using enterprise resource software?
20%.
Wow.
On the CRM?
Our company.
I think on a basic level, everybody's doing something, but it might be a shared Teams document or an Excel sheet where you have different salespeople gathering in leads that way. And I think in its most basic sense, that's a CRM. As far as the more advanced stuff, we certainly have a few people that are using those type of platforms, but I would say it's pretty rare at this point still.
We work with almost exclusively small and medium-sized businesses. A very small percentage of our clients use a true CRM, and an even smaller percentage of them actually use it correctly. Right. So, I mean, I think that's something that very few people are adapting to quickly. Again, because it's not cheap in both the cost of the product and or the time required to implement it correctly.
That's interesting because I'm sorry, Jim. Jim's clients probably have 100% usage on CRM, but we're seeing,
to Tim's point, we have 100%. 100% of our clients have ERP and CRM, but 5% of them use it to its fullest, or in the best possible way.
I think that's the key, because I would say closer to 80% of our clients have some kind of line of business application or CRM platform, but it's whether or not they're actually taking the time to take advantage of all the features of it. I think that's the bigger problem.
That is the bigger problem. The
That's
adoption of
software in itself. I mean, you yourself as an IT company, how well do you use Windows operating system? Probably 40%, and you're in the field.
I just had a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. Our line of business application is called Autotask, and we probably use, we're much better than we were, but we probably still only use 80 or 90% of it. Yeah. So we're even not using 100% of what we could be using.
Correct, and it's even enough for you get other tools to add on to those tools and try to make that all work together. In any business, you've got your main line of business and then this little sub app that does this one little thing, and you need to integrate that into your main application. There's a whole challenge there, that's one of we help solve and things like that. So
right now I'm having trouble keeping up with the improvements that come through every single day. Microsoft CRM, the Dynamics product. You could spend all day in documentation and not know the most recent improvement. Correct. So using it correctly really becomes an issue of eventually somebody like me transmitting it to one of my customers. This is new, you could use it in this way. And that's it. There's just way too much to learn to actually use it 100%.
Microsoft's a really good example of a company that doesn't make it easy on people either. Because they come out with a new feature, or they buy a new company, or they put a bunch of R&D into something, and then they change the name of it, and then 3 weeks goes by, and they've changed the whole thing all over again.
Then they sunset it.
But
and then they sunset it, exactly.
But 3.0 does work then.
We have about 15 minutes left, and I do want to move on. Well, first, is there anything more that needs to be said about that before we move on?
100% of my clients use a CRM, because we won't take them on if they don't have one.
Okay, I think I knew that. That's great. What is the metaverse? Is it a buzzword for virtual reality? And what is virtual reality? How does it work? Is augmented reality more likely to be the killer app? And where is all of this headed in terms of applications for businesses of all size? Big question. Who wants to start?
I'm going to take Ralph's point that he made earlier and use it as a jumping off point, because he made a point that Second Life has been around for 30 years and it's not a real big deal. And I said the exact same thing to somebody maybe 2 weeks ago. I was thinking about it this morning, trying to figure out who I was talking to. But I think to answer the first question, and this is not exactly my area of expertise, but it's come up quite a bit recently. The metaverse is a virtual reality platform. It's just Meta's or Facebook's version of it. It's like saying, is a Marriott a hotel? I think there's a couple of problems with this, and I personally consider the metaverse to be a flop. I think that's probably what most people would agree with. But there's a couple of problems with it. There's the cost of adoption and the barrier to entry in getting involved. Teams does essentially the same thing that a couple of years ago we were looking at the metaverse to be able to solve, which was how do you get people together in a collaborative way? So Teams, Zoom, all of these kind of platforms that handle collaboration and communication do that a lot easier with technology that people already kind of understand, and there's not this huge barrier to entry on it. You don't have to buy a VR headset. You don't have to have a super advanced computer. So I think that barrier to entry needs to come way down. I think it needs to become a little bit more accessible to people. And I think the virtual reality space that we're talking about needs to go way up in terms of quality, technology, design. The metaverse is essentially what I would consider a low poly environment, or something that's very rough around the edges. So think of the applications of something like that. Like, let's say you want to show a house in virtual reality. We're a long way from being able to get that level of detail and resolution and realism from the platforms that we have today. So I think those are the challenges that need to be addressed before this becomes a little bit more widely adopted. And I think it has to not be a cash grab. Like, the metaverse was pretty obviously, a marketplace, and that's where they tried to steer it. So I think companies need to take a slightly different approach to get people to be interested in it.
I think if you don't believe that the concept of the metaverse is here to stay, you're outside of your mind.
No, I didn't say that.
I think that, this is one of those challenges here locally. Again, talk to any kid, any elementary school kid, any grade school kid, and ask them if they play Roblox,
Minecraft,
the Roblox and Minecraft and all these different platforms that are occupying this quote-unquote metaverse space. Is this virtual reality space where you can go and you can interact with people. It's very difficult for us in the United States to truly understand and appreciate the value of something like the metaverse, because we have a beautiful place to live, and we're not living on top of one another, and we have access to resources that many other third world countries don't have. But if you give kids in India the opportunity to walk away from the uncomfortable living conditions of living on top of one another, or in another part of the world where they don't have access to the same resources that we do, and they can hop into this metaverse in the Roblox and any of those other platforms and live a different life, that's a game changer. And that's something that the more and more people truly realize, that we got to step away from just this tiny little sliver of what we see here in the United States. These platforms are here to stay. I mean, the same would have been said when I was growing up with the beginning of AOL and Google and the beginning of the internet.
It's video games.
It's the same idea. So I think that the faster that people start to look at it, play with it, ask their kids about it, ask their kids to explain it to them, play video games with your kids and grandkids, you're going to start to see some of the validity of those platforms and how you could potentially integrate it into your businesses one day. We're still a ways away, but if we continue down this same path of evolution that we've gone through in the last 2 years, over the next 10 and or 20, we'll be there before anybody knows it. So I think that you just have to look at it from a different opinion, is that ask the kids, ask their grandkids, and play around with the technology, and you'll see quickly.
Oh God, I'm old.
Sorry, Bobby.
You can, sure.
You guys have all spent your lives working on computers and being in computers, so your children will be in the metaverse. And the metaverse is a lot bigger than, it actually started, I wrote an article on this. It started in 1962 with a guy named Walter Wriston who put Citibank online and put the United States government's treasury bills and notes online, and that started the whole process. The metaverse is a network with data that may or may not be virtual or augmented reality, because you're able, the connection is the critical factor of the metaverse. The fact that I can go and get information from 1962 and get it from overseas and then communicate it to somebody all at one point, that makes it part of it. The virtual reality part, the augmented reality part, I believe, using the words of your question, is the killer app here. The ability, because you don't need expensive equipment. You can turn on your phone and the camera in it and just point it at something, and whatever the augmentation is shows up here. They're using it in education right now with children so that they don't have to buy them headsets. And there's plenty of businesses that are doing the same thing. We're seeing a little bit of it here. My company actually is a Microsoft partner. We sell the HoloLens. Pricey as hell. It's a $3,500 headset. But what appears in front of you is magic. It's literally magic.
Yeah.
You can make anything you want appear in front of somebody, and yet they can still see you. They're not hidden. That's augmented reality. Virtual reality, the entire environment in front of you disappears and a new one is provided. Augmented reality, you're in the same environment, but things are in front of you that other people don't see if they're not wearing a headset.
Or even their phone, Snapchat, your filters, that's AR. That's all it is.
I think for most of our small and medium-sized companies, there's probably not a lot of use of products like the HoloLens. But I can tell you for certain that the big manufacturers in the area are experimenting with those. And know that Valorec has done work with the HoloLens as well as a number of other solutions, trying to come up with something. You think of the idea of a maintenance person trying to rebuild a piece of equipment that maybe they haven't actually worked on before, and being able to see while they're looking at the equipment what it's going to look like when they take off a piece, or what it should look like when they rebuild it. For the smaller companies, I think some things that could be particularly useful, or the landscaper that's having trouble with a problem weed at a customer site. You got the camera, the Google Lens app to check out what that is and what's going to kill it, and a couple taps of your screen and you're on the University of or Michigan State University ag site telling you how they killed that in southern Michigan, or any sort of applications like that where it's identifying something and figuring out how to deal with it, kind of along the same lines of where ChatGPT can be especially useful with answering questions. Same thing with the augmented reality for the individual or the small business. I think that's the big thing, the instant answer on something that otherwise you might have to take a picture of it and send it to somebody, or take a clipping of it if we're going back to the example of a problematic weed, and show it to other people, So it's you get that instantly now, instead of taking days or weeks to get your solution.
We have 5 minutes left. What would you all like to add that I haven't asked? How do we summarize what we've said today? And we'll go around the room, starting with Steve.
The last thing I want to get out to the public is don't be afraid of it. Embrace it. Learn it. educate yourself. How can I utilize technology? We covered a lot, pretty wide conversation here. But how can you utilize it in your exact, your business, your industry, and how can you capitalize on it to get a competitive edge?
Let me interrupt here. To what extent do people, you sound Rumsfeldian here, how many people don't know what they don't know? And if they don't know, how do they know what the problem is and how to fix it? Or they should try to fix it?
I would say it's mindset, and either you surround yourself with yes people that challenge you and don't bring new ideas, or you surround yourself with people that challenge you on a constant basis and are bringing new ideas to you. I think it's the way you lead from a business standpoint. Leadership, I think it's the way you lead and the type of leadership that you employ. Do you want to, I always say the Steve Jobs quote, I hire smart people and tell them have them tell me what to do. If I'm the smartest person in a room in an internal meeting, I hired the wrong staff. So I think it's mindset.
I think the thing that a lot of small to medium-sized businesses can do to start to ask the right questions and understand what you don't know is to do a tech stack analysis. Write down every piece of technology you use, what problem you're trying to solve with that technology, and how much that technology costs. And if you sit down and take the time to write down every varying piece of technology that you're using, the problem that it's solving, and the cost that's associated with it, you're going to be that much more well prepared when it comes time to looking at all the other options. Or when you do find yourself in a room with someone that does know the answers to those things, when you bring in that consultant, when you bring in that tech company or your advisory company to say, this is all the software I'm using. Is there anything else I could be using? What solves these problems better? And I think that's step one for every small business that they should be doing today.
The fortunate news is that people don't have to decide for themselves these things, and they don't need to know what they don't know. That's why companies like mine exist, to help guide people in the right direction. So to jump off of what Steve said, I think first they need to embrace it. They need to understand that this is important. It's important to their business and it's important to their future. And then they need to get the right people on board and really leverage those people to help them.
Agreed. I think we're all here in the business of change management, right? That's what we do. We help people change, and it's incumbent upon us in the IT world to introduce these things to people and help them make their decisions based on the information that we've accumulated over the years in the business, and help them guide them to the right place. And that's us. That's on us in a lot of ways, right? So that's what we need to do. That's my opinion of it anyway.
No, I agree. Technology and this stuff is not going away ever. So, I mean, you might as well embrace it and find yourself a trusted advisor to, if you don't understand it, find somebody to trust, and they will advise you and get you where you need to be. I mean, that's what we specialize in. So, yeah, that's pretty much it.
And especially for those of us that are MSPs, we kind of have a responsibility to learn this stuff well ourselves, so that we can teach customers what's available. The idea of businesses out there that don't know what they don't know, that's really our role and responsibility, as was mentioned over there on the other side of the table too, to help them learn that and also show them ways they can do things better. And I think especially from the service provider side of it, remembering that it's not always about what solutions we can sell to the customer. Sometimes it's about showing them a better way to do things because of something they don't know that is out there, like whether it's getting answers from ChatGPT or using an augmented reality program that's open source and free. Those are things that we can use to help our customers improve their business without it actually being necessarily a solution that we're selling them. And sometimes that's just as important as their IT infrastructure or various solutions that we may be proposing.
Last word, Ralph?
I think in the next 5 years, you're going to see AI become so pervasive and ubiquitous that a lot of the problems that you're thinking of, Dennis, will be automatically solved by the AI actually saying to the person, you don't know this, but you need Excel for what you want to do. and it'll just happen in that way. Everything from kitchen appliances to your automobile to your desktop appliance, whatever you're using, will start talking to you and telling you things. And I think that's going to also make a lot of what we all do go away, and we're going to have to operate at a higher level.
Thank you all. This has been absolutely fabulous. Thank you all for your insight. Really thrilled with this. I think our readers and our viewers are going to learn so much from it. So thank you for taking the time to be here today and to provide such outstanding commentary.
The Business Journal Roundtable series is sponsored by iSynergy, creative digital advertising.